Good afternoon, everyone. Let me welcome our next panel. I request Pranav to please let others enter. For the next panel, we have with us Mr. Harshvendra Soin, who is Global Chief People Officer and Head Marketing, Tech Mahindra. Please help me welcome Mr. Anil Jalali, who is ex-CHRO, Capegemini, and now a coach, business advisor. And let me welcome Mr. Manmohan Kalsy, who is CHRO, United Breweries Limited. Welcome all of you to this amazing panel. I request everyone to please unmute yourself. Welcome, everyone. I'm sure you can hear me and see me very clear.
Yes.
Amazing. So today our topic of discussion is new expectations from leader in the VUCA world. I'm sure the success of any organization is relatively proportional to the quality of its leader. And I'm sure while leading an organization has always been a challenge, and today it's even more challenging. While you and I are talking in the backdrop of Corona, I'm sure that today leadership is not just only about defining the vision and mission, but also it is about managing and navigating the organization through these volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous times. I'm sure leaders like you, and I'm highly grateful to all of you to join on this panel. I'm sure that your experience, your insights will add value to our listeners today, and it will be a great there will be great key takeaways for our other HR leaders. For the very first question, I am keeping first question open for everyone. There is a massive disruption recently, right? On the other hand, we all can see and we have witnessed it that CHRO, HR leaders have led the organizations from the front. So it is very difficult to lead the business continuity plans during disruptions. So my question to you is, the VUCA world demands a shift in leadership skills, leadership perception, and their skills, right? How ready do you think you are as a leader, and specifically as an HR leader? And also, how ready do you think your leadership is? I am straight going to Mr. Anil Jalali. What's your take on this?
Thanks, Resham. And at the outset, let me just thank Business World and yourself for having invited me, and also my greetings to fellow panelists, Harsh and Manmohan, as well as everybody who's listening in or watching, rather. This is, a topic that sort of has stayed evergreen. First time I remember I read about this was some 7-8 years ago, and it, continues to, be a point of discussion, amongst audiences. And I'm just curious to figure out when was this term coined, term, and somewhere I read in Google, it was coined sometime in the 90s. So my sense is, the VUCA thing is not necessarily something very new, and is perhaps here to stay. But what is perhaps different is that VUCA is getting, more and more challenging as days pass, and it's becoming, more relevant, for leaders to sit back and pay attention to it and see what they need to do to prepare themselves and their organization, for that. One is, my views in terms of the readiness, etc. I think leaders in general are aware of what it is and what the challenges are, and so on. I think what is key is whether and what are leaders doing about it. while awareness itself is a good start, but taking action and preparing themselves and the organization for it is something which is very important. Now, the recent pandemic situation and COVID has certainly brought back focus to this term, and everybody wants to talk about it. And it is indeed a challenging situation for everybody in the organizations. But point to note is also that organizations leaders have responded well to this situation, and I can speak in the IT sector itself how organizations have quickly adapted and demonstrated resilience and moved everybody to a home. The customer deliverables have been ensured, and the industry is up and running like it was ever before. And nobody thought we would ever be in this mode, but we are in this mode, and organizations have done that quite successfully. I think the point is uh, change doesn't always come in this do or perish mode. If we hadn't
Right.
responded to it, we would have perished. But change doesn't always come like this. It comes in different forms and shapes. Sometimes we can't see it coming, and so on. Therefore, one should expect that more like this will happen. May not be a pandemic, but it could be something else. And therefore, what is the readiness of the organization to deal with that? Can we demonstrate what we demonstrated during this crisis on an ongoing basis? Let me give an example. I mean, a lot of organizations demonstrate resilience, etc., employee compassion, supported employees, well-being. All of those things happened. The agility was demonstrated. Can we demonstrate this on an ongoing basis? How can we be able to sense some of these things on an ongoing basis, be prepared as an organization, and operate from a deep inner purpose, have that vision and purpose for the organization, and have that as a guiding light, versus reacting to situations, right? I would also say we need
That
to
is
develop
insightful. Yes, that is insightful.
yeah. Just the last point on that, we also need to develop systemic muscle to be able to deal with anything that may come up, like I said, in different forms and shapes, model scenarios, and test them. Uh, People, capability, business portfolio, etc., various strategic pillars of success in an organization. Those are my opening thoughts on this.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That was really helpful. So, just to take 3 points from you, what you said is rightly said that this disruption was a surprise, was a big surprise to each one of us. Also, at this moment, what matters is the action, right? You want leaders to act and then lead, to demonstrate. And also, it is important to find the purpose to take the actions, right? I'm
Have a
coming straight to
long-term
Mr.
purpose,
Soin. What's
and
your
not react. Yeah.
yes,
Sorry. Yeah.
of course, of course, of course. Right. So, Mr. Soin, how ready do you think you are as a leader, and also the other leaders in your organization?
So I'll thank you, and Resham, as usual, I think thank you for very insightful topic and questions, and lovely to see my old friend Manmohan and Anil there. Let me give you a different perspective, and I'll add to a different context to what Anil just said. And I will start by quoting Robin Sharma, who said that anyone can lead when the plan is working. The best lead when the plan fails. And I think today, with the pandemic, the plans seem to have failed. And the kind of leaders that we need are quite different from what they were earlier. We are, as we say always in TechM, we need wartime heroes, not peacetime generals. because to come out of the pandemic, we have the three phases of really survive, revive, and thrive. You need a different mindset and a different kind of leadership there. As we go forward, I think skills will be very important and not degrees. Erstwhile, if you're an MBA, you were presuming you would do well, but at this moment, in the time of crisis that we are in, and I would say hyper VUCA, it would be skills and not degrees that would be important. And we will have to have leaders who move from the traditional command and control to inspiration and resilience. Leaders obviously will have to be more authentic and empathetic. We've clearly seen, whether you're IT company or not, digital prowess is going to be humongously important for leaders to survive and thrive. And we have seen at least that leaders who had a deep connect with their team members and families have done a lot better. So, coming back to your question, are we ready? I think let me answer in four distinct things that we need to be ready. One, if we have to be ready. Leaders have to act with a sense of urgency today. Second, we have to communicate, but communicate transparently. Three, we have to respond productively to missteps. This is very important. Missteps means we are bound to make mistakes. We are bound to have failures, but we need as leaders to react very differently and very productively. And last, we have to be agile and we have to consistently update our plans. Otherwise, we will never be successful leaders. So, as long as organizations believe that their leaders have these foresight to do the four things I just said: act with urgency, communicate transparently, respond with productivity to missteps, and of course, engage in agility and consistently update your plans. I think we will be ready. And most of our organizations have shown that we've actually done a lot better than people thought we could. So thank you once again, and back to you.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Communicating with transparency, reacting to it, and having a plan to it, and also trying to understand the urgency and also the need of VR. Correctly responded.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is respond productively to the failures that we are bound to have faced with. Because this time, leaders who take initiative are bound to make mistakes, but really the organization has to deal with it very, very productively. It means you will have to allow for missteps and have to cater for what to come out of it once you do a misstep. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Right. Considering the uncertainty and complexity, you are really saying it correctly, right? I am coming straight to Mr. Kalsy. What would you say? How ready are you as an HR leader?
Okay, so I'll take it up from where Anil and Harsh left, and I think they've summed it very well. Some of points I would say would be repetitive, but just bear with that. So I think a crisis like this or any crisis doesn't come with any notice. So you've got to respond and react in the manner best suited to your organization and to the industry that you are in. To that extent, talking about my peers and my leadership team, I think and I believe that we are poised very well to deal with the current situation, because I think the first thing that the troops, and Harsh said about generals who lead from the front, and what the troops really need to see is a master class in action. And if you have people who are seasoned pros heading your organization in various functions, it is relatively easier because they are able to roll their sleeves and do it. And when they do it with some ease, there is a sense of confidence in the followers as well, right? Because there are no rule books to doing different things in a very disruptive setup that we are in. For a field force which was used to doing, say, 30 sales calls a day, to do these calls now on digital sales plan and create a digital sales report on a daily basis is a very different mindset, right? Because people have been used to, working their beats day in and day out, and now to make their calls on phones or video calls, etc., is a different skill altogether. And therefore, I think the accompanied strength that any organization will draw from their leaders would be their credibility with their team members. Here is where the authenticity and credibility will yield a lot of results, because it's a strength of character which will sustain you in these moments. And while we call it VUCA now, and there wasn't a VUCA, but I remember a time when we used to run some factories in Punjab in terrorism time, and what Harsh said, I would completely resonate with that we never looked at degrees. We just looked at, a strong spine, and of course, we looked at, tall guys, preferably to run our factories in those days. But, so while the branding of VUCA was never there, you've dealt with crises in the past of different kind, and you bring those learnings. And what people like to see is a very credible, authentic leadership in front of them. I also believe that going forward, the traditional structures will not stay. You will be required to, have very unconventional structures, and those unconventional structures will have different kinds of layers in the organization, delayering, lesser layers, wider spans, and people who are not comfortable working in a very volatile market will find themselves in difficult spot. To come back to what you asked me about whether we are ready, yes, we tend to believe that we've used the period gone by very effectively. The resting period was utilized by my team very well in running all kinds of development centers and development programs, etc. And then the force is quite ready for the challenges ahead. Thank you.
Amazing, amazing. I am impressed, and thank you. That was very helpful and insightful. Yes, you mentioned that we all need to have a very different set of structures, plans, and strategies ahead to deal with this kind of unconventional and volatile times.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. I'm coming to Mr. Jalil saying that Mr. Jalali, saying that internal communication of any organization is, at this moment, is really crucial. We need to be transparent, we need to be authentic. As Mr. Soin has rightly said, that transparency is required. And internal communication of any organization directly affects the morale and also the culture of the organization and of its employees. To what extent do you think that the open communication is crucial? And also, what do you think needs to change in the organization to make the communication more safer for the employees?
So in short, the
Jalali.
answer is very crucial. Yeah, can you hear me? There seems to be some lag, I guess. So I'll continue. So I was saying, in short, the answer is very, very crucial. There's no doubt about that. Every organization, does have various means of communicating, and often we see leaders standing up, either send mail communication, especially if the audiences are large, not always possible to, reach out in other ways, but key messages are often shared in that fashion. We also see, other ways of digitally communicating, or there are open houses and those kind of things in being able to reach out. What I want to highlight amongst many ways that we can communicate And where the translation is lost is the ability of all these various mediums to really reach the end employee in the organization. And you know, typically, especially in the large organizations, um, where the headcount is large, the various mediums of communication get, I would say, broken when the messages are not understood by the first line of management, the mid management or the front line management or the first line of management, whatever we may want to call them. And I want to highlight that aspect of the organization and our ability to bring them along, empower that layer of the organization, equip them, communicate with them, make sure we hear them, understand them, listen to them, becomes extremely important. So I would say the first line of communication and engagement has to be this crucial layer in the organization. And once we've done that, once we've gotten their buy-in, their mind share, their understanding, they are the ones who are in turn communicating and engaging with the rest of the, I would say, the lower rung of the pyramid on a day-to-day basis, right? And often they are the ones who receive all sorts of questions, concerns. Where are we headed as a company? What does this mean? What does this change? Why this change, etc. Or all sorts of conversations that happen with the soldiers of the organization happen with this layer of the organization. I'm not trying to say that there cannot be other layers that we can directly communicate with, but it's difficult to have a top leader having a one-on-one with 100,000 people, right? Therefore, if we can equip and empower frontline leadership of the organization, also make them accountable for communicating with their teams, I think we win 50% of the battle over there. So I would say that's very, very critical.
Great. Yes, you said that we need to be more open, more understanding towards what people are coming to us and saying to us, and also it's time to reimagine the conventional rules and standards. Right? Having said that, we are in the phase of flattened hierarchies or broken hierarchies, I would say. So, Mr. Soin, what do you think that how the expectations of employees are changing towards their leaders? What employees in this new era are expecting from their leaders?
So obviously, the pandemic has ensured that things change on the ground. I think the most important thing that the employees expect from a leader is to be compassionate and empathetic. And I cannot even begin to tell you the importance of what we call in TechM as our RISE philosophy. As you know, the Mahindra Group is known for the RISE philosophy, which is about three things: accepting no limits, alternative thinking, and driving positive change. And in the environment that we are in today, an employee expects a leader to live the right philosophy. That's one. Second, I think the most important thing today, and I strongly believe that compassionate leadership, compassionate communication is going to be key if organizations are going to survive and organizations are going to thrive. And basically, compassionate communication and compassionate leadership lead to high collaborative environments. And especially something like today, it is basically building relationships which are rooted deeply in honesty and empathy. I started by saying these two words, which really result in less of conflict. Basically, there is a quote that our chairman always says. We have a series of programs called reflective conversations where leaders are taken through a series where primarily what you're taught is how do you reflect before you react? How do you pause before you punch? So essentially, I think today is the time for all of us to reflect before we react and pause before we punch. And I think that is what truly is what all our employees are looking forward to and wanting from all of us as leaders in today's VUCA world.
Amazingly answered, and I really like that. I mean, we need to pause before we, pause before we are about to play ourselves and about to act, right? And also, I really like that you have emphasized on empathy and compassion.
That's correct.
Moving on, Mr. Kalsi, I think when any disruption affects any business, it also affects the valid expectations of business owners, of partners, of employees. Those are reasonable expectations, right? And it's important to take care of both the things on either ends. How do you manage both the things as you are an HR leader, right? On one side, there are disruption, there are, disruption affecting your plans, but on one end, there are valid expectations. How do you manage this situation?
Yeah. So let me put it this way, that when you ask for expectations from the leadership team, these are invariably from the promoters, and so you have minority shareholders which are represented by the independent directors on your board, and then you've got the majority shareholders who are represented by the promoter nominees on our board. In our case, it happens to be, a joint venture where Heineken owns a substantial equity in the company, and there is the UB management as well, right? And I believe that across all organizations, the expectations from the management team in such a volatile environment would be consistent. So let me speak for our setup, and then my colleagues here can comment if these are relevant for other industries as well. I think first and foremost, the expectation from a management team, a leadership team, is whether it's capable of safeguarding the company, the very company, which means, in terms of the legal entity, whether the legal exposures can be handled, the financial health of the organization, is the team capable of running cash lines and preserving cash flows, and most importantly, the reputation of the firm. Because in times like these, if you are insensitive on anything, whether you use digital marketing or you are trying to promote yourself at the expense of the tragedy and crisis which exists across in the society, then there can be a backlash to the reputation of the firm. So first and foremost, I would use this bucket saying safeguarding the companies is the foremost expectation. The second one, since you've asked me three things, I will borrow from what Harsh said, is the agility. And agility is not just action for bias, biased on for action, but also the speed in terms of learning newer things, responding to newer things. And it's not about being senior or junior in the organization. There can be a very agile organization with a very tenured workforce, need not be from only modern economy industry, but the mental side of agility has a lot to do with how the boards and the shareholders will look at their company for seeing and reposing their trust in the management teams. So it's a very important factor in my view.
I
And
totally
the,
agree on with you on this point, and I want to say one thing. Sorry to interrupt, but yes, there are different set of people who are accepting technology in different phase, right? We are now in the phase of accelerated digitization, so there are people who are very open to accept the change, and there are people who are open, but they are not as fast as others are, right? So I see a gap there, and where there is a gap, there is always an opportunity to create innovation, be it
yeah,
innovation in ideas, leadership, or your plans and strategies.
yeah.
Please go ahead.
So I think while there is no choice for anybody to say no, I will survive or I will stay without being on this journey of digitization, I think we have a responsibility to equip them. And so that choice is not available that we will do without it. And when you talk about innovation, I think as HR folks, our responsibility there is to create an organization which doesn't have the fear of failure. Because I very strongly believe that if you want innovation in an organization, you have to let people believe that they can try out many things, and many of them will fail. But if the fabric of the organization is such that failure is really feared by people, then it will not encourage them to try out new things. And innovation to me is more of a cultural soft skills thing than a program in which you're doing product development. It's a mindset, whether you call it Kaizen, you call it small improvements, you got many programs on shop floors which involve cross-functional teams. And to come back to your original question of, the three things, I think the third most important expectation from any leadership team in this environment would be, what is the depth of talent you have? The radar for a promoter would shift from just looking at the leadership team, but down into your distributed organization, in your regional heads, your state heads, your factory heads. Are they competent in running it very independently? Because if you look at how the countries got divided in this pandemic, is not by states but by districts. The district magistrate or the collector today decides what kind of restrictions you have on movement of people, of movement of goods, and therefore the people who are based in these districts representing your organization in a dispersed setup have to be of a quality you can take local decisions independently without looking at headquarters every time, right? So now, more than any time before, you will reap benefits if you've got very strong leaders in the organization dispersed across all your locations, whether you're running factories or you're running sales units. So these are three things in my mind which would be the clear expectations from any leadership team.
Thank you so much for that amazing response. And I agree with your points that yes, there are expectations of safeguarding the organization. Yes, of course. You are one of the frontline leaders, I would say. So yes, you hold many responsibilities. So, Mr. Kasi, you mentioned about agility as well, right? So, rightly
Yeah.
mentioned by Mr. Soin as well. So, my question to Mr. Soin is, what are your three pieces of advice for any individual as of now to be more agile, be open to accept the changes? What are those three? What are those three pieces of advice you would like to give? Mr. Soin, I
About
can't hear you.
our right. Sorry, I was on mute. So I would take you, Resham, the three rise principles, and I think those are our guiding principles to stay agile. Again, alternate thinking or alternative thinking, accepting no limits, and driving positive change. However, there are a few steps that one has to do in any organization that really wants to stay agile, which is one, the power of youth. You have to empower people. You have to have the power of youth completely be ready. You have to align your reward and recognition programs. You have to be a coach to ensure that, and the leaders have to be coaches to ensure that the organization is aligned to a bigger goal. And of course, you have to make sure that I think Manmohan said it, allow people to make mistakes. However, one thing that we've seen in this pandemic, digital mindset has kept people alive. Digital mindset has kept people agile and organizations agile. And I think the one way to actually keep a company agile with a digital mindset is to align leadership. Everybody to be aligned to build a compelling vision on what you want to do. Second is obviously to mobilize the organization to make sure you have the champions in the organization who help you achieve that vision that you set out for. Building capabilities through skilling, upskilling, training, whatever you call it. And then, of course, through your KPIs and reward and recognition program, make sustainable. The problem today is that a lot of companies do the first two steps, aligning leadership, setting a vision. But when it comes to empowering, that's where we actually are sort of still lagging as a country and many organizations in it. So I think the opportunity is huge. Resham, I've always said it. While this is a social crisis, while this is a social pandemic, the opportunities to change our business models for the better is huge. We have to grab the opportunity which comes out of this pandemic, this crisis, and look at what business models can change. How can companies get more agile? How can companies get more transparent? And I think that if we do, will be very good for organizations and countries itself.
That was really insightful, and I would say that yes, the opportunity is huge. We need to come together, we need to collaborate, be agile, and communicate together to sail through this crisis and do wonders in future.
That's correct. That's correct.
Mr. Jalali, according to you, what are those three things? What are those three things? My question is to Mr. Jalali. What are those three best practices or strategies or plans? What are those three major plans do you see will stay with us for longer time? It can be best practices, your initiatives, some values. According to you, what are those three things?
See, we've been discussing the VUCA word, and what it really means is that we don't have answers to everything, and the leadership also may not have answers to everything. But what they can do is to establish methods by which they can, create greater understanding, create greater clarity, establish a vision, try to connect the dots, and so on, right? Which means that they ought to be open to influence. We often talk about influencing skills, and we teach that in management and leadership. Are we ourselves, is a leader open to influence? Are they authentic enough to accept that they don't know something? And then they have the ability to connect the dots, they have the ability to bring people together and create that clarity out of the ambiguity and create that understanding of the uncertainty, etc. I think that's one aspect that I think we need in leadership. It also means we ought to have ear to the ground. Often we hear of, employee engagement. But how much are we really able to effectively listen to employees? There are practices like continuous listening, and we have these pulse surveys and so on. While we institute them, but are we really genuinely listening? Do we have the ear to them, and are we taking action what we are listening, right? And that becomes another uh, aspect, perhaps. With genuine intent, can we establish those continuous listening practices? Third is, I would say this word really requires a bit of wholeness, leadership, or for that matter, for any individual, and going deeper inside, uh, and understanding self, generating greater self awareness, and operating from that self awareness. Uh, tend to wonder what will come out of it for individuals and also for the organizations who are being led by those individuals. So, can we imbibe and inculcate um, practices that help people create greater self awareness in the leadership domain?
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. So we are just left with 1 minute. I'm coming to each one of you to have just one word answer. So you, Mr. Kalsy, Mr. Jalali, and Mr. Soin, what is that one thing? What is that one thing that you as a leader would not miss on in the VUCA world? Mr. Kalsy.
I think while we're cutting a lot of stuff around cost, I would seriously advise not to cut even a single penny on development, L&D kind of initiatives that will stand in very good stead. There is enough opportunity
Thank you.
elsewhere to
Mr.
cut.
Soin.
I would just say we should continue to learn from the past, but build for the future. And the one thing that we have to do is always stay curious. Never listen to people who say don't be curious anymore. So be curious, build for the future.
Amazing. Mr. Jalali.
I would say, keep your eyes on the long-term view with short-term prudence.
Amazing. And now is the time to end this panel. This was an enriching discussion for me. I have learned so many new things from all of you. Thank you so much. I'm highly grateful to you. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.